And we're live. Greetings, everyone. I hope you are having a wonderful start to your weekend. Welcome to another Brony Debates Live. I hope you're all doing well out there. We've got a really good lineup tonight for a pretty interesting topic. Mr. Bootleg Bard, who couldn't be with us tonight, wanted to know, his original question was, are new cartoons or old cartoons better, or is it just nostalgia talking, as you can see in his question in the thumbnail there. And when we were picking the topics and making our schedule for ourselves, we were asking, well, what qualifies as new or old? And then that broke down the conversation into something more along the lines of breaking up the different cartoons into eras, mostly by decades or regions within like 20 years of each other. So tonight joining us, we got DJ Skywalker. How are you doing, sir?
I'm here and ready to chat about cartoons.
All right, and we got Cordero joining us as usual. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm pretty good, buddy. What's up?
Nothing much. Let's talk some cartoons. Joining us for the first time is Golden Fox. How are you doing tonight?
I think we're all ready to crush each other's rose-tinted glasses. Yes, I'm good.
Well, speak for yourself. I don't wear rose-tinted glasses. Quick sidebar here. A long time ago, I did a video called Brony Debates Children's Entertainment. And for that video, I researched cartoons across the board, across generations, for like 40 hours, just watching as much as I possibly could. And I determined something very different from what you guys are going to say, but we'll get to that later. Also joining us on the debate for the first time, he's been on Friday Night Fights before, is one of my patrons, Mr. Angel of Speed. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm feeling quite honored to be on the same podcast as not one, not two, but three Brony analysts today.
All right. I'm glad you can enjoy yourself. I'm sorry, what was that?
This isn't my first time being on Brony Debates.
It's not?
Yeah, I could have sworn there was another time.
The season 10 comics.
You're right. You're right. So, in case you didn't notice, everybody out there in chat, I'm really bad at remembering my own show. And last but not least, we got Silver Quill joining tonight. How are you, sir?
Well, there go my eardrums.
I'm old.
Alrighty then.
We made it up.
Are we seriously going to deal with the soundboard throughout the majority?
We're going to deal with 2 soundboards, and it's going to get really old really freaking quick.
Competing soundboards.
And that's when Golden Fox knew he done goofed.
What was my goof?
I swear to God.
You agreed to this.
So did you.
Oh,
but I'm the one with the soundboard.
You and DJ both have soundboards, and I swear to God, I'm gonna end up making you, Silver Quill, run wheelbarrows with DJ. You know what a wheelbarrow is, right?
Isn't that where you put your hands on the ground and your feet in someone else's arms?
Yep.
Are you really that comfortable being near my soul?
No, I'm...
Oh, God.
You and DJ.
I think we're all comfortable turning you into KFC, and it'll be a feast for all of us.
Okay, so before this gets any more violent... Before this gets any more violent, let's thank my patrons. Very grateful for all of their support.
You're welcome.
Especially on the $10 and up tier, including DJ Skywalker, who I just threatened, and Pony Cordero, who's with us tonight as well. There's also Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministry, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Sodden, Girder, Senko, Kyle Christensen, Rein-Kun, Morningstar, QFlash, Billy Henline, Alden, MacManx, Easy Mode Gamer, Sophia, Bootleg Bard, who couldn't be with us tonight, and Dark Malcontent, author of the Metaverse series. Check out all their links in the description. Most of these guys make some pretty good stuff of their own. If you want to get on the show, I'd love to have you. It's only $1 a month to get onto my Patreon. Anyway, let's start with tonight's Patreon guest, Angel of Speed. What is your favorite? What do you believe is the best era of cartoons, and why?
Before I answer that question, I'm gonna make a few of y'all feel old. I'm a Zoomer, aka a 2000s baby.
Okay.
So I don't have much nostalgia for periods before my time.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still going to talk about that time period anyway, as well as the modern era. But if I had to pick a favorite, it'd probably be the modern era.
All right, and why is that?
Because it has good storytelling and animation and all that good stuff.
Okay, but how so? How does the storytelling and animation separate it from other eras of cartoons and entertainment?
Well, mainly because there's been a balance of slice of life and serialization's been occurring throughout the decade.
Alrighty then. So hold on to that while we go down the rest of the panel here and get their answers as well, and then we'll start fighting with each other. Golden Fox, what is your best era?
All right, so the ones that I'm rooting for range from the 80s to the 90s, because within that era, it started out roughly with the concept of making TV shows to sell toys, which on the surface it does sound more marketing based and much more of like lack of substance, but there was some substance that people were able to gather because of the connections they were having. But as we venture on later in that decade, we had shows that were just more based on adventure and fun. But then moving on to the 90s, TV shows became more of a variety and not just strictly for one thing after another. You had shows like Animaniacs, where things were more goofy and rooting back to the roots of Looney Tunes, but having a more modern spin on it. You had the Batman animated series, which had a much darker tone for those who were more into more action and more dark territory. And just this is just only appearing at the face value in mind, but between those two decades, it was more. I find it to be a little bit more experimental in what they were going for to win the audience compared to either an older generation or the later generation. But I mostly favored around that era.
All right, so hang on to that, and we'll move down the line here. Silver Quill, what is the best era of cartoons?
Well, if you ask me my favorite, I will always say the mid 80s to mid 90s, as that's when I grew up and will always have a soft spot. But I would argue that the 2000s and onwards integrate the best of what has come before while experimenting into new fields, with a greater diversity of animation aimed not only at kids, but also at adults. And that very often that animation is moving across boundaries that were once very segmented. And so I applaud the innovation of the new and think we're building on what's best, and hopefully the best is yet to come.
All right, sounds good. Cordero, what do you think?
Okay, so I've got a hot take for us tonight. Basically, my thesis is that Disney ruined everything, but they ruined everything 100 years ago. Because everybody talks about Disney buying up and owning everything, and controlling animation and creativity, but they've actually been doing this for 100 years, and animation peaked at Fleischer Studios. Disney killed Fleischer Studios, one of the early big competing animation studios. If you remember things like Popeye the Sailor Man, Betty Boop, Coco the Clown, Bimbo, some of these, if you don't recognize the name, if you saw them, you would recognize them. These old cartoons from Fleischer Studio, they're often confused with Disney or Warner Brothers because their style is kind of in the middle. It was its own interesting style. It was a little bit of the roundness of Disney, but the shape of Warner Brothers, of what Warner Brothers would end up looking like. And Disney basically just gobbled them up and destroyed them. Like, I don't think they bought them, but they like, I have to look up the history again, but they basically killed Fleischer Studio. And because of that, animation became a thing that was only for children. I'm blaming this on Disney. Disney set us back like 80 years on animation by making it specifically a thing for children and soft around the edges, because you were talking about Batman the Animated Series for people who like stuff a little darker, and every now and then it took 80 years for us to get back to that, because Fleischer was the dark studio. That was the one where it was going in that direction, and then Disney ruined it. So anytime somebody makes fun of you for being into cartoons as an adult, that's Disney's fault, and rip Fleischer Studios.
All right, real quick question here, just out of curiosity, because I'm actually uneducated on this myself. Was Felix the Cat part of that studio as well?
Somebody Google that. I don't know.
Oh,
it could be.
okay.
It
It feels
Felix
like
the cat.
it feels like it would
Felix the Cat,
fall under that.
Is that old? Is Felix the Cat that old? Like, this is the
Yeah.
20s.
Yes.
Created
Over
in
1919.
1919 by Pat Sullivan and Otto Messmer.
Wow.
Were they Fleischer Studios? Who were they?
Doesn't say immediately on Google.
Copley.
All right.
Copley Pictures is what it says here.
Right.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's just how animation was done back then. But okay, hold on to that. And DJ, what is the best era of cartoons?
For me, I'm kind of torn between two eras. Personally, my all-time favorite is roughly mid-90s to the mid-2000s, because we had a whole lot, like Alden had said earlier, we had a whole lot of experimentation, but I also feel it was a pivotal turning point for a lot of action and comedy cartoons, where we could have a lot of both, where I find the modern cartoons are kind of lacking, especially in the action.
Mm-hmm.
But historically, I see the 60s to mid 60s to mid 70s as the most important, because that was Hanna-Barbera's height. And even though they get dunked on so hard, especially now, they were pivotal for making animation very big for cheap.
All right.
Which has always been the issue with animation.
And for me, my answer is Looney Tunes era stuff. So late 40s through the 50s, perhaps even a bit into the 60s. I'm looking at Looney Tunes. I'm looking at Chuck Jones. I'm looking at Tex Avery, Mel Blanc, the people that were making like Tom and Jerry, things of that nature. I believe those are the best. And my reasoning for that is that overall, in terms of ratio, the average quality is just leagues beyond the average quality and enjoyability of all the other genres. So, like I said earlier, and you know, this is where everybody can start dogpiling on me if they want to. I did like 30 to 40 hours of just watching as many cartoons as I possibly could several years ago, from the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, things like that, because I had pretty much given up on television because it was so bad until Friendship is Magic. And in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, I would find an average of like 2 to 4 shows that were actually good and actually enjoyable, and the rest were just utter trash. It didn't matter who was making them. It didn't matter what channel they were airing on. But when you go back into the Looney Tunes era, it was all funny. It was all enjoyable. It was all well done, and with very little exception was it boring. So in terms of average quality and enjoyability, the Looney Tunes era is the best by far. So now that we've all introduced our points, now we start fighting with each other. So with what I just said, does anybody want to add or take away from what I just said?
You're stupid.
Okay, that's
What?
And the first shot is fired.
Okay, here's my shot. Whoever said that Disney ruined animation because they were targeted for kids, did you forget that Walt had that saying that you're dead if you aimed at kids and that adults are kids grown up anyway?
I was. I
When did
thought it was
Walt
the
say that?
80s that made it that way.
I'm sorry, what were you trying to say, DJ?
I was gonna say I thought it was the 80s era that made cartoons more of a kid thing.
No, somebody claimed that that it's
Me.
Hold on, we
Yeah.
got too many
Yes,
people
and it's
talking
correct,
at
and I'm
once.
correct.
All right. So, what's your rebuttal to that there, Golden?
So Disney stated as a quote, and this was something that I think contradicts what he said earlier, saying that it's Disney's fault that animation was strictly for kids
Yeah.
for the past 80 years. What Disney said, literally in quotes, and you could search this up. You're dead if you aim for kids.
Oh, I know.
Adults are kids grown up anyway.
I know that quote. That quote is trash.
Why is that?
Okay, explain it to me.
They are referring. Okay, they're referring to the idea of throwing a bone. Give me just a second. Thank you. Sorry about that. They're playing to the idea of you have to give parents something to enjoy while watching the stuff for kids. The whole premise is that the cartoons are for children. But what he's saying is, oh, we need something in there for the adults to enjoy. But it's still ostensibly children's entertainment. It's just that you don't get caught in the trap of just making things wiggle on the screen for babies. It's basically a statement of you have to put effort into stuff. And one way to look at that is like, well, if there's something in there for the adults to enjoy, you're probably putting a little bit more effort into. But if you interpret that directly, literally, of, oh, they're making cartoons for adults. No, the fuck they weren't. They were making cartoons for children because children are the people who they wanted in the theme parks, and those are the people they wanted to sell stuff to. That's just one of those, I want to sound smart as a creator thing where they're telling you one thing, but they're saying something else. And all sorts of artistic doublespeak like that across creative industries.
So you're telling me that aiming for something more universal is a sin. That's kind of what you're implying here.
I think he's saying that it's a disingenuous effort.
It's Disney. Aiming for a general audience is fine. Disney cornered the market in the freaking 1920s and set the tone and established what animation was going to be. And animation was something for children. Because that wasn't decided when animation first came out. Like, it wasn't decidedly something that would be for children. That was part of Disney having a big chunk of the early market share and butting out studios like Max Fleischer to make something that's almost exclusively for children. And then you get guys like that going, oh, you can't forget about the adults. You got to aim for. They're not really aiming for adults. They're congratulating themselves on how clever they are that they tricked everyone to buy their children's shit.
Okay, so Cordero, I got a question for you now. How do we know that wasn't a result of the culture at the time as well? So it could have been that animation was already seen as a medium for children. And also, say like Snow White, for example. Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, things like that. They were really only able to show so much because in all reality, the audiences were very sensitive to any kind of explicit content back then. Like what we consider explicit and what they consider explicit is prudish to what we consider explicit. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, Snow White and such, like, you're already way too late. That's already a decade and a half past the Disney takeover.
Okay.
Of animation. And yeah, people are prudish about a lot of things at that time that we're not prudish about now. But really, it kind of shifted. There's a lot of things that you could do in early cartoons that you could not get away with now. And nothing is a direct one-to-one ratio, but a lot of it is like, because we were talking about dark stuff before, implying death or tragedy or sadness. Those things were fine. Those were commonplace, especially in the world between wars. You're between the First and Second World War. Subjects dealing with like death and things like that were completely fine to put into animation. And now people would be far more upset about stuff like that in animation nowadays. But that's just one example. And as far as like being prudent, that tends to, again, this is not a direct one-to-one across the board,
prudishness tends to be more relaxed in like sexual and social context. Whereas like the violent and the dark stuff, I would say we're more.
Hey, Cordero.
Your quality is jumping all over the place.
Yeah, Cordero, we're losing you.
What we see
Yeah.
children handle evolve in ebbs and flows over time. But when animation was started, it was not a.
Dude, you're cutting out a few times.
I don't think you can hear us.
Yeah, I don't think you can either.
Oh, wow.
You might have a problem here.
Cordero.
Difficulties.
Pardon us while we get this figured out. Hey, Cordero, can you hear us? No, he can't. He walked too far away from whatever he was doing. All right, so while we wait for him to get back, let me see here. Silver, who do you think is the most wrong?
Well, I don't agree on the idea that Walt Disney was just patting himself on the back. But this, I think the mistake is to assume that to be an adult is to enjoy darker or more crude humor. I think Disney products very often are visually stunning and quite beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think an adult can enjoy that as much. I think, at the risk of sounding like I'm disparaging on children, if there is a way to maintain attention if you keep it fast-paced enough. But Disney always added a certain artistry to it, which I think does appeal to adults as much as it does to children.
Now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Now, the idea that Disney killed the diversity of animation, that's I think very speculative, because you're basically arguing the path not taken, of which we know very little, mostly because it is the path not taken.
So go ahead.
Well, no, part of me is musing aloud as I do this, but
okay.
Please,
so I've got
go
a couple of points I want to bring up and talk to you guys about. So he had mentioned the sort of noodle style of the very early experimental phases of animation, and then we listed a few different studios that all had similar styles. Now, before the stream, we were sort of talking about the Cal art style and how they all looked very similar to each other in terms of art. But then we talked about Disney and Fleischer Studios and the folks that made Felix the Cat, and the layperson can't really distinguish those three. Now, they all came out of roughly the same era of cartoons there, so that was really more or less just how it was done and the standards that were set. I think it was more of everybody that was trying to get into animation, figuring out how to do animation, and then that's what it ended up looking like. Now, if you talk about Disney sort of stylizing everything, that could possibly be I don't know what else there was between, say, like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and then we start getting into the 40s and 50s. Like Chuck Jones started appearing at that point, but I can't really name anything else other than Disney that looked like the way that Disney did. Because what they did is they filmed a lot of their scenes for references and then rotoscoped over them.
Rotoscoping.
Mm-hmm.
The only way to get the heavy metal look.
Yeah.
I'm back. My setup crashed.
I noticed.
Welcome back.
Yeah, we had you drop out in the middle of your rant there.
Dang it, it was a good one too. I totally dunked on everyone.
We got Cosma Inspiria saying Fleischer Studios also did the Superman cartoons and not many. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, the old
Yeah, they did a lot of stuff. They were a giant.
Mm-hmm.
They were a giant, and Disney massacred them.
Alrighty then.
Well, actually, I'd like to follow up. Superman, the older cartoons that I actually have that DVD on the shelf next to me. Would that not be an example of a cartoon that appeals to both children and adults?
How many adults watched it back then?
probably a decent amount, because what we consider appealing to children and adults, like we're talking 100 years. There's more than 100 years of animation. Like the taste of what people like is totally different. Like if we showed something that's for kids now to somebody 100 years ago, they would be like, "This isn't for kids or adults. This is garbage."
Well, I don't know about that. I mean,
Because just as culture is so different, either they wouldn't understand it or they would be horrifically offended by it.
well, I can accept horrifically offended, but probably because they like a lot of stuff we're now offended by. But
Yeah,
going back,
and
but
vice
going
versa.
back, but going back to Superman real quick. Within those cartoons that I remember, while they had some very real-world elements, such as the fight against the Nazis, there was nothing what I would call adult. It wasn't very. There were not overt sexual tones. There was not excessive violence. Much of it, in fact, I remember
More
that
political.
they use shadows very often to convey a fight. You are watching the shadows cast by the brawl,
That might have just been easier to animate.
or it might have been easier for the censors. But my key point here is that that was something that could appeal to the whole family without having to throw anything in. That's why I'm not convinced of the dismissal of Walt Disney's quote. I believe we've seen that quote in practice throughout the years.
I also would like to add that part of that shadow animation was an inspiration for the Batman animated series, which you also stated that it wouldn't be until the 90s that we would have a variety and not just what you claimed earlier about cartoons being directly aimed at kids.
Oh, so wait, Superman inspired Batman?
None of these are hard and fast.
Ooh, but
What?
I just want to say that if Superman inspired Batman, then once again, Superman is best superhero.
Oh, there you
There you go.
And there comes the hate comments.
go.
Bring it.
So, DJ, I haven't heard from you in a little bit. What do you think of all this?
Honestly, Cordero, I'm sorry, but I got to side against you.
And why is that?
I'm with Silver and Golden that I don't think Disney's to blame for this. I'm pretty sure a lot of the feelings towards cartoons being kid friendly mostly popped up when they became super commercialized. I think Disney's always been for everyone. Not just kids.
I also, sorry for the interruption. I also wanted to add the 70s. We had what's his name, Ralph Bakshi with Fritz the Cat, not Fritz the Cat, Felix the Cat.
No, you
What's
were
one of-
right. You were right the
No,
first
you're
time.
right.
Fritz.
Yeah, the
Fritz
first
the Cat.
X-rated cartoon. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so-
that was also the guy that rotoscoped his way through Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, that garbage movie.
And Cruel
you,
World.
you have to remember that I'm talking about large macro trends over the course of a century. So pulling out the tiny exception examples that you can find along the path to those 100 years really does nothing to serve against my argument, because I'm arguing in macro trends, not
Alright.
oh well this was dark at this point, or this was for kids at this point, and this was for adults at this one point.
So then let's get back to the original question here. What exactly about that makes that era the best?
Oh, of the Max Fleischer
Yeah.
era.
Yes.
I guess a lot of what I like about it, is there's something special about the pioneering era of anything, of when something is new. There's always an explosion of creativity, and then usually it drops off for a while and kind of is samey until there's another big push in technology or something that explodes creativity again. So I like the early cartoon phase, just like how any new art medium phase is amazing, because you get anything and everything is brand new.
All right. Would anybody else like to either add or take away from what he said, or attack somebody else for their wrong opinions?
Well, to follow up on that pioneer spirit appeal, I think that's part of what I enjoy so much about the 2000s and into the, well, by God, we're past the tweens decade, aren't we? I'm sold.
2020s.
2020s. Okay, well, I'm going to say that there was a great deal of pioneering in animation throughout the 2000s and the 20-teens. You had the introduction of flash animation, the evolution of computer graphics. And as someone who has enjoyed Reboot and Beast Wars, and is now seeing on YouTube clips of stuff like a show called Dino Trucks, the evolution of CG as a medium is quite stunning. So there are several trends of animation in development in that time period, which led to a greater diversity and perhaps distinct identities. That's why I find a greater appeal.
But Flash, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The one thing about more recent cartoons over the past is that one of the hard parts of the past is that a lot of the mindsets then are now very unappealing to us. There were overtly racist jokes. I mean, just wow. I still remember.
Don't be racist.
Kids don't. Well, you know what? Sometimes you need that. You need to be that blunt. Don't be racist.
Garnet told me not to be racist, so I stopped.
So wait. I'm sorry. Donut.
Garnet.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking red versus blue there for a minute.
Yeah, him too, I guess.
Isn't Garnet the personification of red versus blue?
I thought that was Steven Universe. Wow, I'm getting confused now.
Garnet is Steven Universe.
Yes. Okay. Good. I'm less confused now.
That joke went over.
It was a Steven Universe PSA joke, Brony. Catch up.
You catch up.
I the jokes to you.
Okay.
Brony was making a joke that
Everybody
Garnet is
get it.
red and blue together.
Yes.
Well, either way, you're making me dizzy. There we go.
Hey, Looney Tunes.
God damn it, bro. God damn it, Silver.
Thank you. But modern era, I think, has learned from the past and has a lot more appeal to a greater audience. And while I can understand if people, sometimes the politics overrides the creation, I'm not denying that. But I think we're in a much more wider view and appeal now than we've ever been before. So if the adventure of pioneering a genre and the explosion of creativity is an argument for what's best, I think the 2000s and teens ekes out a little further.
My argument against that would be that a lot of the flash animation I saw come out of the well, I should probably actually say the 2010s, because are you talking about the 2000s or the 2010s?
Well, I seem to be encapsulating both, but yes, as I recall, the 2010s had Steven Universe.
Yeah, so
wait, no, not Steven Universe. What am I saying?
It did.
No, that was so many. No, Johnny Test. That was what I was trying to say. Oh God.
Yeah. So Johnny
Apple's Orange is right there.
Yeah. The thing about those is that we got a lot of very similar looking cartoons, so it almost had the same problem as like the 30s and previous, where we riddled off a bunch of studios there and they all looked the same and most people can't tell the difference. And I saw a huge dip in quality in terms of the animation and the storytelling overall. Now, the 2010s did give us Friendship is Magic, and the 2010s did give us Dan Versus. And they also gave us Gravity Falls, which is what I would say that, like I said earlier, there's only like 3 good shows in each of these decades, and those are the 3 good shows from that decade. And
oh no, well, I'll have to argue with that in a minute.
Yeah, so they end up looking very similar unless you're looking like deep into them, and I wouldn't even say Dan Versus is well animated. It's just hilarious and way too relatable for me than it should be. So what do you think about that, Silver?
Well, I think you're doing a disservice to a variety of shows. Static Shock is 2010s. Samurai Jack is 2010s.
Those are 2000s.
Those are early 2000.
2000 to 2010. In that, sorry, I'm picturing different areas.
I
So
think
in the
your memory is starting to get a little,
Eh,
A little fuzzy.
yeah.
well, for arguing
No, the
2010,
bird's going senile.
oh, going. Okay, so 2010s, though, I still think you're doing a disservice to a lot of programs that came out, not necessarily what you saw. Now, Johnny Test, not a great show. I mean, you've seen one episode, you have literally seen the whole series. But then there are a variety of other Flash programs that came out. A lot of them on PBS for a young audience. And in doing so, I believe that there's still a lot of quality. It's not as, maybe it hasn't made as huge an impact as how bad something like Johnny Test was. But I still think that there's more quality than loss. Also, I always find it funny, dip in quality. I remember my childhood when characters would talk, the wrong voice would come out of a character's mouth, or Transformers was especially notorious for this. They put the wrong characters, the wrong color scheme in place. So Starscream would lead Starscream on an assault against Starscream.
Okay.
That could actually happen.
Yeah,
so
I didn't watch enough of those cartoons to know about that, but go ahead.
basically, what these days when people talk about a dip in quality, my old man is showing because like, hey, you call that a dip in quality?
And I'm talking about things like Johnny Test, about Phineas and Ferb, and I seem to be the only person on the planet that thinks that show is trash. I had others in my head for a second there, but American Dragon, Jake Long, it just keeps going on. They all look the same. SpongeBob from that era just increased its obnoxiousness from what was already pretty obnoxious in the early 2000s to astronomical levels. And I remember being a teacher in those years and having my kids come in and go, "Victory Screech!" And I've just never been so tempted in my life to just punt a kid across the room. It was like, that's what I'm talking about. Until Friendship is Magic came around and just had people talk like actual people again, I was pretty certain the whole medium of animation was lost.
Were you watching Adult Swim on Cartoon Network at any of that time?
When I was a teenager, I watched Aqua Teen Hunger Force, and that was about it.
Well, that good, because Aqua Teen, Space Ghost, Coast to Coast, Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, and all of those eventually led into Archer. I'd argue those were all great examples of using Flash, which was in its infancy. They may not get awards for best animation, but I found them hilarious for their writing and quality.
Mm-hmm.
And also, they were cartoons that appeal. Well, they did often rely on more adult humor, crass or sexual or just not something you wanted to hear a 10-year-old. I saved that for Xbox. Get cursed out by a 10-year-old. I was like, what the hell?
Golden Fox was the one cursing you out.
Oh yeah, when Brony says, "Oh, when I was a teenager," so last week.
I'm sorry, what? Are we not talking about almost 20 years ago now?
Sir, City, you're still not in my league. Meh. Get my Ovaltine.
Get the oxygen.
Wow, and I thought I had a hot shot. Jeez.
Meh, come over here, Sonny. I'll beat you upside your head. Meh.
All right, how about a little...
I could just imagine him grabbing a cane and just, like, hitting him, like, Donkey Kong style.
I have a cane.
Do you? I thought I was the only one.
I got one.
Yeah, I got it at BronyCon.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, we gotta get back on track here.
Yeah, we do.
So you think for what was it, like the diversity of characters and story that gave way to better animation? Is that why you're vouching for the 2000s and 2010s so much?
Very much, but also because they're taking what was good about previous eras and building on it. There's also a very strong nostalgia wave running through this time period. The reboot of redoing of Thundercats, Voltron Legendary Defender, Transformers Prime.
I haven't seen
Sadly-
Transformers Prime yet, and I've only seen clips of the Thundercats one, and that one looked all right, but Voltron was not very good.
Oh, really? I thought Legendary Defender. Now, if I'm remembering
The
right,
new Voltron.
yeah, okay. You haven't seen Voltron: The Third Dimension.
No, I haven't.
You have not known true suffering then.
All right.
Honestly, I thoroughly enjoyed Voltron Legendary Defender. I think it's it may surpasses even the original.
Interesting. Well, I'll have to watch the original. I don't remember the original being anything to write home about.
Oh, if for nothing else, the way they very artfully sidestep the gorier aspects of the show is hilarious.
Alrighty then. So Angel, I haven't heard from you in a little bit. What do you think about all this?
I agree that with Silver and the fact that the 2010s built on what made the 80s good and 90s good and like made them better.
So here's it might be a logical fallacy, but I couldn't put a name to it at the moment. That we seem to be running into is that because of the nostalgia factor, which if anything plays into Bootleg Bard's original question. So the nostalgia factor and the fact that that a lot of these shows paved the way or laid the foundation for better shows makes them good retroactively is what seems to be the sentiment here, and I don't understand how something simply being a foundation or being a predecessor or having nostalgia value makes it any better than what it actually is.
It doesn't.
Well, first off, a piece can be the best it is at the time with the technology available. I mean, come on, a building.
Well, all I care about, most of what I care about, like together, 75% of what I care about is good story, good voice acting. As long as the animation isn't god awful hideous, then I probably won't even notice it if the voice acting is good and the story is good, and that's what a lot of these shows end up lacking.
I think there are a lot of.
Go ahead, Cordero.
You can say. I was going to make a big contentious point on Silver Quill, so you can go first because you might be faster.
I'm done, but you go for it.
Well, I think a lot of the cartoons of the 80s and 90s did have fun stories and did have really good voice acting. Quality of animation may be the weakest aspect because, well, the industry was trying to sort itself out. And as a result, a product I think can be the best of its time period with the best available, but then there is a second layer of appreciation on top of that quality.
So when you say the industry was sorting itself out, you're talking about the 2000s and 2010 still, yeah?
And in that, I'm talking more about the 80s and 90s.
Okay, so the problem the 80s and 90s had is that they were certainly not trying to sort themselves out. They were trying to make the cheapest possible product to sell the cheapest possible toys and make the most profit margin off of kids that didn't know any better and were largely unsupervised by their parents. And as a result, yeah, I mean, everybody I know that likes G.I. Joe and Transformers from those eras. And what else was there? Some to a degree, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Let me think for a second. Street Sharks
He-Man.
came later. He-Man, yes, He-Man. The Heather's way
He-Man,
into
definitely.
They were all there to sell toys for the cheapest possible product because the mentality was it's only kids watching these. They don't know any better. We can just do whatever the heck we want. And so the only people I've known that really liked those things was for the nostalgia value and not at all for their actual quality.
Let's see here. Well, I will definitely not agree with that.
Why is that?
Because talking with some of the writers, sure, the corporation side of things, they're the ones who are setting up an animation so that it's done in like the opposite side of the world, and it's done cheap, it's done fast. But the writers, what makes them memorable is the writers having nothing's too far. There was this, nothing is out of place. Nothing is too silly to put out there. Nothing is off limits in exploration. And I'm looking up the quote for the exact words, but there was a G.I. Joe writer who really challenged himself against the violence aspect of the show. He wanted to show that there were consequences to this violence, which was a struggle because, well, 80 censorship was you could fire any number of lasers, you just couldn't hit anything. So he showed the dangers of drug addiction in one episode.
Okay.
And so that I believe that, oh dear. So I do believe that the writers had more of an investment than just let's sell a product. How can we make this sales product fun and good? And that it is that same mentality that carries forward so that My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, was more than just, let's go fly this helicopter over a rainbow. I'm glad we can buy this for $9.99.
I want to fly a helicopter over a rainbow. This sounds great.
Air traffic control has reported all manner of craziness.
Air trash control.
Yeah, it will be at that point.
I mean, I agree. I agree with your point. Obviously, the creatives are going to try to make the best thing they can with what they're handed. But I think the larger point that Brony's making is that the corporate mandate of spending the least amount of money to put out, to put out something that's toy bait. And even if, and yes, the creatives did go in there and make great things from time to time and have good stories and character moments. But the overall trend of this is toy bait. Let's just get something out there that we can make money off of. It makes me disagree with the idea that the 2010s built on what the 80s and 90s set up. I think that the style of cartoon making, the philosophy of cartoon making rather, was wildly different. In the 80s and 90s, the philosophy of cartoon making is we need a toy that this can be built off of, and we just need something iconic. He-Man. He-Man doesn't have to have an amazing storyline because it's a warrior dude with a big sword. Transformers doesn't have to. Yes, sometimes it does. All of these cartoons were good at some point. It doesn't have to have an amazing storyline and characters because they're space robots. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles doesn't have to have an incredible story and intricate characters because it's ninja urban turtle fighters. Like the whole idea was make something aesthetically pleasing that looks good, is memorable and iconic. We can build toys off and the kids will love that. And when you look back at the nostalgia of the 80s and 90s, that nostalgia and that fun was built on how fun those properties were to look at and play with in person or pretend and let your imagination go wild. In the 2010s, they were either trying to borrow that, like literally take that nostalgia and just reskin it and do it all over again. Okay, let's take this property and remake it. Or in the 2010s, they were starting something fresh and building off of something new. And also, the philosophy of cartoon making had changed. Things in the 80s and 90s were episodic. You tune in, the status quo is ostensibly the same. These and these characters fight these and these bad guys, and it's the same thing week to week. Whereas in the 2010s, the philosophy had shifted to be more story and character centric. Okay, we're going to start with these characters. They're going to have an arc and a journey. When you tune in matters because you'll be at a different part of the story. It went from episodic to very serial in the 2010s. So the 2010s cartoons are either nothing like the 80s and 90s cartoons, or they're very, very deliberately exactly the 80s and 90s cartoons so that they can reboot it.
And a lot of the, additionally, Silver, what I think you bring up the examples of when those shows were actually had good. I think those examples that you brought up is the one episode. Those are the exception for those series rather than the rule. And we also got to keep in mind is that
I'm not saying they were bad. Sometimes those shows were good.
Right, but
creatives do a good job with limited resources.
And so then we fast forward to the 2010s, where a lot of the people that were growing up on those 80s and 90s shows are now being handed the intellectual property rights to make more of those shows. And they get to say, okay, now what if this show that I enjoyed as a kid was good? Which we've all been there. Like, I used to love Ed, Edd n Eddy. I tried to watch Ed, Edd n Eddy a couple of years ago and went, frick, I liked this. The heck was wrong with me?
I guess you grew up. I don't know.
Well, I'm a little offended neither of you has said the magic word.
What's that?
Neither of you has mentioned that the cartoons of the 2010s and onward had continuity.
Oh my god, dude.
I mean, I said that except the word. I said all of that except for the freaking word.
You did not say the word.
He was sitting there with his...
Serial storytelling. Oh, give me a second. So, serial storytelling with character arcs. I just said it in more words. I just didn't use the word. Obviously, that's continuity based.
Here's the thing, Cordero.
I literally described continuity without saying the word.
Cordero, Silver Quill is just mad because you blue balled him because he had his finger over the button for that sound effect and then you never said the word.
I know
Also, he would have had
God,
to charge you.
Listen, just because I know I'm being God doesn't mean it doesn't make me upset.
Okay. Does anybody want to try to salvage this dumpster fire?
I did have a comment on the modern cartoons.
Go for it.
Okay.
Well, I personally do enjoy a lot of the modern cartoons. I think one of the things that brings it down on the list for me is that while especially the 2010s had a lot of highs, they also had some of the biggest lows in animation.
Oh.
For every Avatar: The Last Airbender, you have a problem solved.
That was early 2000s.
That was late 2000s.
Yeah, I suppose, but you said 2010s.
Avatar was mid, but you also for every Gravity Falls, you got Squirrel Boy. And we already brought up Johnny Test, which I liked, but it's not exactly a prime example of cartoons. But I think that's just what it brings it down in my ranking, is that while we had some great cartoons, you can almost list them off on your fingers, and then there's everything else.
For every hit, there's a miss.
Yeah,
or I guess several misses according to you.
Well, is that not true of
I find there's a
every
lot more misses.
Well, that's why I'm objectively right, because the Looney Tunes didn't have this problem where there were so many where you miss 10 times and then you hit one and somehow people think you're good when you hit the one. It sounded like Golden Fox had something to say a second ago, but DJ was talking. What's up, Golden?
I don't remember.
Oh, for God's sake.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, it does happen. It happens to me. It's happened to me this stream, so I shouldn't talk trash. But I did say something pretty inflammatory there, and I'm surprised nobody's called me out on it yet. Are y'all just gonna let me get away with it?
So I couldn't.
Okay. Go for it then.
What did you even say? Maybe we thought it was like a joke or something?
No.
There were no misses with the Looney Tunes.
Yeah, in terms of quality and enjoyability, the 40s and 50s era with Chuck Jones, Mel Blanc, Tex Avery, they practically did not miss. So
they were very consistent.
Yes.
They were very consistent in their quality. But here's the thing. Looney Tunes was a high floor, low ceiling cartoon. You could always count on an amusing show, but as far as entertainment value, it's kind of mindless. Looney Tunes. It's sort of like background interest, whereas like later cartoons, like where we're talking about there's all these hits and misses, it's because they're aiming higher. They're shooting for more story, more character. Like there's more risk involved with that kind of entertainment where you're trying to get people involved in characters, where Looney Tunes is haha, he run off cliff and not fall down till he looked down. Like it's very visual here. It's much safer. It's much safer to write Looney Tunes type stories. So yeah, high floor, low ceiling, but
right,
very good.
But I'm talking about quality here. So Cordero, let me ask you this: if I tried to do a round off backhand spring into a Misty, and I drop myself on my neck and break it, did that make me a good gymnast? Because I took the risk and I tried to do something that I didn't have the skill to do and I failed. Did that make me a good gymnast?
Oh. No, it did. No, trying doesn't make you good. I see what you're saying, but I'm saying that the highs of the ones that do it well are higher than what Looney Tunes could ever offer.
Mhm.
Well, in that same vein, Brony, if you're doing the same trick over and over again, does that still make you a good gymnast? If you
That's
just have
called
the one
insanity.
trick that you're very good at?
That's certainly the question.
That's an
I'm not
Olympic
sure.
athlete.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure I could answer that. But yeah, that I guess
Because that
ju-
is the Looney Tunes. They have the one trick. It's
well,
slapstick,
they do.
some witty dialogue, very simple situations.
Yeah, and they do. While they do have a bit of a formula, I'll give you that. That doesn't make it bad, and the execution is really good. Is really
I didn't
good
say
every
that.
single time. Well, I know, but that seems to be what you guys are trying to hold against me is that they're samey, and I'm saying
What we're saying is
Okay.
that enough?
Well, also, why are you bringing Pokemon into this?
Yeah, where does that stand?
oh, I never said Pokemon. What are we
Who
talking?
brought Pokemon in?
Nobody said Pokemon to my knowledge.
Yes, you did, Bron.
Pokemon.
Bronny said, and I quote, "I'm going to do a triple
quote.
backflip into a Misty."
You've got to be fucking kidding me. That was like a 5-minute pun.
He waited 5 minutes for that one. It wasn't even good. First of all, I don't like the implications here, given Misty's age. Thank you very much.
Hey, you're the one who brought her up.
I didn't.
You're the one who assumed it.
For legal purposes, all characters on screen are all dudes. For legal purposes.
Okay, yeah, sure. We'll go with
I'm
it.
just feasting on your rage. It is quite delicious.
Okay.
Eat up.
Does anybody
Like,
have
it's-
any
it's-
actual
you wanna
points?
I mean, no one's attacked mine yet.
Okay, so tell us where you were again. You said you were like the Hanna-Barbera.
Hanna-Barbera?
Yeah, so talk about, now that we're on the topic of doing the same thing over and over again, let's talk about Hanna-Barbera and how it did the same thing over and over again, except it looked horrible the whole time.
Not exactly true.
How so?
They had some trends, but they were not all the
Kind
same.
of true.
Okay,
They
we
had
got
a lot of Scooby-Doo clones. That is true, but that is not the only shows they had, nor is it the only ones they're remembered for.
Okay, so they did have
Name another one that remembers.
Flintstones,
Yeah,
The Jetsons.
El Kabong,
Yogi Bear,
Yogi Bear.
Banana
Those are
Splits.
all the same show.
Magilla Gorilla.
Huckleberry.
No one remembers Banana Split.
How is Yogi Bear the same show as the Flintstones?
They're all Hanna-Barbera is Hanna-Barbera. It's let's have this character walks out on screen and goes, "Oh no, what's going on?" Like that's every single Hanna-Barbera show feels exactly the same, with the possible exception of Scooby-Doo, which kind of felt. I've always said that Scooby-Doo is Hanna-Barbera's best show, and it's only okay. Every other Hanna-Barbera show is garbage. Have you watched like the Flintstones proper, like the old, like rather colored or black and white, like the original Flintstones? The
Yes.
cartoon was trash. Like
Before
it's not good.
before the cigarette commercials.
That's the best Flintstones thing that was ever been created. Is Winston tastes good like a cigarette should. That's my favorite Flintstones cartoon. Is that commercial?
Flintstones was an animated sitcom.
It's so bad. The Jetsons are bad. The Flintstones are bad. Yogi Bear is bad. They were all like, those are shows that you could have done 4 shorts for each one of them, and you would have creatively exhausted them. But unfortunately, there's like hundreds of episodes of each one. It's like all of these shows are premises that were worn out after like 4 5-minute shorts. Creatively bankrupt. Where like Hanna-Barbera is actually my least favorite of the major cartoon studios.
I certainly can't agree to any of what you just said.
Well, frankly, a lot of us haven't agreed to him over a lot of things.
Oh, it's all good. Oh, it's all good. It'd be a boring podcast or a live stream if we did.
It wouldn't
Yeah,
be a
that's-
I'm the hot take guy.
But
They hated him. They hated him because he spoke the truth.
But well, I'm going to borrow a line from Eddie Izzard, that Scooby-Doo, which I agree is probably Hanna-Barbera's shining creation. How many stories out there make you root for the coward?
I'm trying
I feel like there's
here.
some in the back of my mind, but I literally can't name them.
They're very few and far between. What Scooby-Doo did that I think couldn't be done in a 4 shorts is really make you like and root for the most cowardly members of the troupe. And that is part of what I think gives Scooby-Doo this bizarre endurance that has seen it through many decades. No matter how complex, the core premise is we're rooting for Shaggy and Scooby
Well,
because they keep getting thrown in these terrible situations.
every time I tried to
Scooby-Doo was my
watch,
exception.
I'm sorry, go ahead,
Ronnie,
Cordero.
Scooby-Doo was my exception to the rule I was talking about, Hanna-Barbera. You're literally arguing against me using the exception that I already gave.
I don't know. I'm finding that I feel there's a lot of ad hominem going around in this argument. We're mad because the corporations invented this to make money. This doesn't work because it's really low end animation. I mean, I feel like we're arguing off different. Yeah, you're attacking the creators of the source rather than the source itself.
I'm going after like things that I thought they were weak at. How is that ad hominem? Ad hominem would be saying that like Hanna-Barbera is racist or something.
Oh well, we'll get into that, won't we?
Oh, we might. I didn't know Hanna-Barbera was racist.
Oh, look, unfortunately, every cartoon reflects the best and the worst of its era.
Mm-hmm.
I made that up. I don't know. Somebody wrote a think piece article about that.
You're probably right. I mean, people stretch all kinds of stuff into that these days. But I don't know. I never rooted for like Shaggy and Scooby. They just kind of frustrated me. If I'm rooting for a coward, it's because it's the coward that really doesn't want to be there, but does so anyway because they have to for whatever reason, right? Shaggy and Scooby never really owned up to anything and just met the occasion head on. They always had to be coaxed, and even then they always bungled their way through it, and it was by happenstance and chance, and that things happened to go right in the end, and they'd catch the villain.
Oh, but the slapstick was the best part of things going wrong. And I'll have you all know, slapstick is considered the universal humor.
I can agree there.
I mean, it doesn't matter what language you speak. Seeing a guy get hit and make a funny face gets every culture to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
With that in mind, I will ask you all to put away blunt objects.
Oh man,
I'm still good, guys. He didn't say anything about sharp ones.
Well, we know you've lost your edge.
Alrighty then. So, Angel, I haven't heard from you in a little bit. Is there anything you want to add to this?
Unfortunately, not really.
Now, are you not as cultured in older cartoons?
I mean, I've seen a few older cartoons, but I wouldn't consider myself cultured per se.
Well, tell me what you have seen and what you thought of it.
From the 90s, I've seen Gargoyles, just kind of like Batman the Animated Series, but from Disney.
So you haven't seen a whole lot of like Looney Tunes or old Fleischer Studios or old Scooby-Doo, anything like that you can talk about?
I might have seen some older Looney Tunes cartoons, but I don't know. And I'm not too familiar with Fleischer.
All right. So here's a question I'd like to ask everybody before we get into audience participation here is where exactly is the line between old and new? Because if you look at the thumbnail again, you'll see Bootleg Bard's question there was, are old cartoons really better than new cartoons? And that, like I said at the beginning of the stream, begged the question, what even qualifies as old versus new? So DJ, what do you think is the line of old versus new and why?
Well, I think we've almost solidified a line in a sense here, as animation seems to go by 10-year trends, or at least roughly 10-year. Almost about every decade has its own animation style. So I think what we're going to define as new is, well, as we're now in the 2020s, we're hopefully in the start of a brand new take on animation.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not we've seen the start of it yet remains to be seen until the end of the decade. But I think if you keep by the 10-year gap, you're going to be able to understand modern and older shows.
Is it a? Do you think it's a?
All my favorite shows are old.
Do you think it's a matter of technology being implemented or some other type of stylistic?
I think it's a mixture of technology and fresh, and I don't want to completely say fresh, but more people getting into the industry.
If you were to draw a line in the sand and give a year that like when you hit this decade, now it's considered new, which would that be?
2020.
2020. Okay, so you're
So
talking
2020 and onward. I could consider shows that are still airing in 2020 new, but I would have to say they couldn't have started too much earlier than that.
Okay, so SpongeBob
yeah,
is
that's been with this.
SpongeBob is new, even though it's almost even though it's like
20 years.
It's 22 22 or 23 at this point.
Well, I mean, if you talk to SpongeBob fans, they have quite the catalog of where each different era of SpongeBob is.
Indeed. It's
I
like
mean, we're in the
worms on a tree.
post-creator death area right now.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
we will be for the rest of the time here. It's not. I don't think Steven
Yeah, but
Hillenburg
there's
is
going to
going
be change-ups now that there's spin-offs and stuff.
I don't think we're going to have
And
an
there's 3
Easter
SpongeBob shows
celebration
right
for
now.
Steven Hillenburg here. Cordero, what do you think? Where is the line between old and new?
Oh shoot! Like if you have to draw, I guess if you're going to draw a line between old and new, you have to go for the biggest leap forward in animation. So I guess you would have to go. You would have to go at the CG. You would have to go at the start of CGI because that would be the biggest leap forward. So it would probably be somewhere in the 80s, like somewhere in the early to mid 80s when computers were were really being introduced to animation. That would probably be the biggest divide of old and new. So pretty much start with like the 80s and 90s Saturday morning cartoon toy series cartoons and onward. I guess you could call that the modern era as we're entering the digital age, and everything before that would be classical if you wanted to oversimplify it in that way.
All right. Silver, what do you think is the difference between old and new?
Was it airing before I was born? It's old.
There you go.
Is it air after I'm born? It's new.
All right, and what makes you say that?
Well, because subjectivity is always going to be a part of any entertainment discussion. A lot of stuff that's coming out right now stylistically feels very different from what I watched growing up. That I don't deny. If we talk about the art styles, a lot of the cartoons I grew up with were always trying to have these hyper idealized physiques, really chiseled looks, and not a pound overweight. Nowadays the artwork is more rounded, easier to animate, I would argue, but it's a very different style. That is my subjectivity from having lived a certain span of years, and I think that how you have experienced entertainment is going to influence your opinions on it. And what works, what doesn't.
All right. Angel. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, just, sticking by what I said. Before me, old. After me, new. Me right now, old.
All right, Angel, what do you think?
Well, what's new today will be old like decades from now, and what's old now will always be old.
Okay. So where do you think the line is?
Well, currently new is like 2010s or like 2000s to present, and old is before that.
Okay. Can you give me a reason why?
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll move on.
I'm convinced.
Golden, where do you think the line is?
I pretty much am along with DJ Skywalker in that it's roughly around a decade because there's always a new era of some sort. But even with shows that were aired in a previous decade that still continue to merge into a new decade, I'm not going to say that like it gets old, but it definitely shows kind of its age compared to whatever new material is being brought forth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit of a blur within the range of roughly around 5 to 10 years.
Okay. And I would say that the line of new starts in 2010. And the reason I'd say that is because once 2010 hit, we took a leap forward with the technology. So, kind of like what Cordero had said. But we also saw a lot more cultural importance placed on the story and the voice acting and the characters, and have things being more story and character driven, with while still maintaining some serialization, or not just serialization, some episodic, balancing the episodic and the serialization is what I'm trying to say here. And as time goes on, we're seeing more and more of the serialization versus the episodic sort of balance. But I can definitely say 2010 is where we saw that shift because it really introduced a lot more flash animation with the technology, and phased out the hand-drawn animation that we were even seeing just a few years earlier, like while Ed, Edd and Eddy was airing, and a lot of the cartoons and a lot of what was on Nicktoons at the time as well. So that's where I would say we're starting to see the new, just because of how drastic the style and the technology is between what even came a couple of years prior to that, if that rant makes any sense.
You still didn't say the word.
It does.
I don't want to say the word just to spite you.
Doesn't he have to pay you if he says it?
I'm not giving him jack.
Quiet, you.
I would sooner pluck him of all of his feathers and throw him in the middle of the room, and maybe I would say, "Behold a man," but calling Silver a man would be an awful big stretch. Anyway,
It's an old fart.
let's get into the audience participation here. So the guys and I have been watching the chat. At least I hope we all have. And taking down your interesting comments and questions, and we're gonna read through them now before we finish up the stream here. So early on, I saw Paladin Pony T said, "Which era of cartoons tackled big or dark issues better?" So let's go down the line here. Golden Fox, what do you think?
Ooh, that's a bit of a loaded question there, because whatever answer I would give, that's I could miss something. I guess around the 80s and 90s, because okay, so if we're gonna talk about dark eras, I think that really all depends. So you could take this with a pinch of salt. I remember seeing some moments from Rescue at Midnight Castle from My Little Pony that had some pretty dark material that turned ponies into slave dragons or slave creatures of some sort by a dark source. That's quite the literal direction right there. But you also have shows like Batman the Animated Series, which had more dark topics with criminal actions and all that jazz, with their spin-off movies like The Mask of Phantasm and so forth, that would eventually merge into a much later era with like The Killing Joke and what's called Hush, and several other titles that I'm pretty sure some people who are fans of Batman would immediately know and would probably throw their answer at me.
Okay.
That's really hard. That's the much I can. That's as much as I can pinpoint in that regard for which eras would have, and it's kind of a tie between those two.
All right. Angel, what do you think? Which era tackled dark or heavy subject matter the best?
I don't know, like probably the 90s.
And why is that?
Well, there is this one example from the show I mentioned earlier, Gargoyles, which showed gun related stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about the episode where one of the main characters accidentally got shot with their own gun because the one dude was being an idiot.
Yeah, I remember that. Oh,
A very powerful episode.
yeah. Ooh. You got me there. I knew I was missing something.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right, so because of that one episode, that era handled it the best.
There are probably some that I'm missing.
Okay. Silver, what do you think?
I would give a nod to the 90s and the 2000s. Sometimes it was, well, as pointed out, there's your Gargoyles, which was a very mature presentation of the issue and introduced it to kids. I find it disappointing that episode has since been censored. There are, however, other shows that try to tackle topics in a much less classic way, like Captain Planet.
Oh, God.
Was less?
No, that was just very overt. Be good to the Earth, or I'll kill you, Captain Planet. Then in the 2000s, I believe there was Static Shock, which had an episode on bullying and school shootings, and also how the characters reacted to that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I also want to point out, when we're pointing out an example, we're saying, oh, I remember this episode from this era. That's an example, probably a shining example, out of a pool. I don't think just because we're quoting one episode does that mean speaks for the entire era's voice.
Well, that was the point I was going to make and that I had made earlier. But yeah.
Well, I mean, we're working off memory here, and take it from an old fart. Memory's a fickle thing.
Yeah, so I'll add my 2 cents onto that in a minute here. Cordero, which era do you think tackled it the best?
Going back to what I said before, I think I'll go with the 2000s and 2010s. That shift from episodic to serial type storytelling, continuity based as it were. There we go. It opened it up for better story and better. Just the whole philosophy shifted to telling better stories, and in order to tell good stories, you need bad things to happen. So just by default, cartoons, specifically cartoons in that era, aimed at young adults or older teens. So like you get the shining examples I can think of are like Young Justice, or like Teen Titans, Avatar, the Last Airbender. Like a lot of these stories, like they handle the dark, even stuff that's like colorful cartoons, meant to be bright and shiny, can deal with these dark things because it's part of a larger overarching narrative. And I think that the switch to continuity and serial storytelling enabled that in a way that you couldn't do in episodic 80s and 90s storytelling.
All right, and DJ, what do you think?
I certainly also lean more on the 2000s, not necessarily the 2010s. Well, they had some stuff. I don't think it's as handled as well in the 2010s, but definitely the 2000s, I think, was handled the best, as Silver brought up Static Shock as a clear shining example of dealing with some very tough issues such as bigotry, homelessness, school shootings. They dealt with a lot of stuff in Static Shock very well. But also we had some movies that dealt with some pretty deep existential themes, especially Pixar with movies like Up and WALL-E. Which I think are some shining examples of some very mature themes that can be very dark especially when you start to overthink them.
Yeah, I'll harken back to a point that Cordero made a long time ago. Is that if anything, themes like that hit adults harder. To totally summarize what you had said, Cordero, is that themes like darker themes and more mature themes hit adults harder because adults have experience with it and basically the capacity to comprehend the existential horrors behind it, where kids are just like, it's a cartoon and that level of maturity doesn't really affect them quite yet. Am I doing justice to the point you made a year ago?
You're around it.
All right.
You're around it. You got points and horseshoes.
Okay, so DJs, because I was actually gonna say that the 2010s handled more mature themes the best on average. Why do you say that they don't handle it very well?
It just kind of feels like, I want to say that they just kind of exist rather than being something important. I don't know. It's kind of hard to put into words. It's like it feels a little too overt in the more modern era to me. Not Captain Planet bad, but I feel like it was handled better.
I will give you a lot that there are a few examples where yes, it is more overt, and then it becomes a lot of these shows end up running the risk of becoming more about what the character is rather than who the character is, and they get very preachy about how to handle certain situations, which I will also say is not always right. But if we're playing a law of averages here, culturally we're a lot more okay with tackling these issues in cartoons these days. So if you take like Friendship is Magic into consideration, that showed a lot of how people can be manipulative without even realizing it, without even having any sort of malicious intentions, but just in the moment not being considerate of the effect that they're having around other people, or just not going about things in the right way and causing damage in that situation. And being more about the communication and how to spot things like that in real life, and having it be a lot more relatable to what you're likely to encounter in real life. We see a lot more of that in the cartoons these days. So it's because of the serialization aspect of it, we can focus more on those themes and give them a realistic sort of time frame to flush themselves out, like Fluttershy, for example, taking 7 episodes to really come into her own. That sort of thing. And we also see that kind of thing in Gravity Falls. Steven Universe, as bad as that show was, even managed to have a couple of good examples in it. Adventure Time, as bad as that was, had a few good examples in that show. I can keep going on. You know, a lot of these shows tackled it as a theme and is part of Silver, I swear to God I'm going to hit you, as part of their continuity. Yep.
I was expecting the wind chimes again.
Nope, he has to pay now. You all got to pass, but Brony has to pay.
I will pay you in 2 sandwiches. Would you like to guess what kind of sandwiches they are?
Ooh, a Brony sandwich.
No, they're my specialty. They're the knuckle sandwiches. All right.
You're a horse. You don't have knuckles.
Yeah. Are you kidding me? I have one giant knuckle that covers the entirety of my foot.
You'd be surprised at how powerful a hoof is from a horse or a deer.
Well, any animal that weighs 3,000 pounds and hits you is going to hit you hard, even if it doesn't want to hit you. I'm known for my thick skull. I've been headbutted by horses without even them trying to do anything to me. It's just clunk, and that hurt.
Explains a lot.
Ouch.
First of all, how dare you?
Listen, Brony hating on things that are good doesn't make me upset anymore, because I've realized that Brony only has room in his heart to like 3 things in one given time, and 2 of those slots are constantly taken by Heather and karate. So
Good for Heather.
There's just no room for Brony to ever like anything ever.
Okay, and the fact that I am a brown horse with glasses, I guess doesn't speak anything to the 3rd slot, but okay.
Well, you can love or hate MLP. Love it.
I still think it's objectively the best show that we've had in a very long time, if almost all time. With Avatar being The Last Airbender, specifically The Last Airbender, being a very close tie or very close second place.
Don't
Well, you picked a very agreeable group to make that point with.
Indeed,
Yes,
indeed. Well, the Silver hasn't even seen it yet, and we still got to fix that. But we got to move on here.
I'm working towards it.
Yep, I gotta make more time in my schedule to have watch parties. Anyway, earlier we were talking about Disney being only for kids, and Thaddeus R said, Fantasia. Do you really think they had kids in mind when they made that? Cordero, what do you think?
Fantasia. Well, Fantasia is a lot of shorts. I would say most of the shorts in Fantasia, absolutely 100%, were made for kids. Some of them, like the one that everyone's thinking of with the demon.
Mm-hmm.
All that stuff.
Night on Bald Mountain.
Yes. So yeah, some of them are. That is actually very reminiscent of the older early 20s animation where you would do so. So that's almost like a callback of Disney right there. But yes, the bulk of the shorts in Fantasia are 100% designed to entertain kids, with just a nugget of stuff in there that the adults would appreciate, which is the tried and true Disney formula for 100 years.
All right.
Like harpy titties.
Sure. Pokemon Fire Eevee says, why does dark equal adult? Golden, I haven't heard from you in a bit. What do you think about that?
I don't know if dark equals adult. It really all depends within the context. I know that sounds like a cop-out of an answer, but if there's anything for adults, it's mostly for what relates to them and whatever conflict they're dealing with compared to what a child thinks. On the other hand, there are things of how children think or not sure on how to approach on certain things that they fear may come across.
Interesting.
So, yeah, so I think it really all depends within whatever it is you're trying to piece together.
Does anybody want to add or take away from that?
Silver, you can go ahead.
Well, actually, I was going to compliment. I think Brony answered that question in advance. When you talk about how adults bring more experience. Now, there are kids who have experienced betrayal or loss very early on, and that may hold its own appeal. But with adults, it is sort of a certainty we've all been through some form of those darker moments. And I think that's why, as Bryan puts it, we bring that experience to it. However, I think it's also true that with some stories you can see that it reads like a teenager trying to be an adult.
All right. Let's see here.
Well, if I may,
yeah, go for it.
I think the reason a lot of people put dark with adult is definitely this is going to sound a little harsh, but on the censorship side, where a lot of broadcasters don't want to show that kind of show darkness with children's shows because they're afraid of alienating their customers. So it's gotten to a point, I think, culturally, where we see darkness and we think it's a more adult theme because those kid shows wouldn't allow such themes or had to heavily subtleize those themes.
Well, okay, but there's a lot of different types of dark themes out there. For example, gun violence. Is gun violence children friendly, DJ?
G.I. Joe.
Is the occult, which is the darkest of the dark, the satanic arts, is that child friendly?
Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Sabrina the Teenage Witch wasn't friendly to anybody.
Salem is
It's friendly to cats.
Nobody should have watched that show. That show was awful. That show had no redeeming qualities.
I watched the cartoon, thank you.
Okay, so let's get you into a CAT scan to check for that brain tumor that it caused then.
Wait.
Oh,
CAT scan, Sabrina. Well done, Brony.
Nice.
I like it better when I intend my puns, but okay.
No. You always intend the pun, even when you think you don't.
All right. Is sexual abuse kid friendly as a theme?
Anybody got crickets on their soundboard?
Oh, here you go.
Okay, I don't know if anybody was being asked specifically, but the answer is simply no.
Exactly. So there's different types and different gradients of dark themes. So we gotta sort of have that discussion as what qualifies as something that you can put in front of a child without it going straight over their heads, or even worse, exposing them to something that they're not physically mature enough to handle yet. And that is the question, and people more qualified than any of us have that conversation all the time.
Well, couple thoughts on some of the examples we put forth.
Mm-hmm.
Gun violence in G.I. Joe, no one ever hits anything, so there's no consequence shown. Occult, the real Ghostbusters, they would show occult dangers, but human ingenuity always triumphed.
And then there's Night on Bald Mountain, like we were talking about earlier, and you had a rampaging, demon that was then exorcised by what we can assume are nuns. So where exactly is the line?
And then,
it's in presentation.
I'm gonna take a bit of a risk pointing this out. When you talk about sexual abuse, would the damsel in distress fall in that category?
Ooh.
Oh.
Because, again,
good point.
April O'Neil in Ninja Turtles was captured very regularly. And even at one episode, Bebop and Rocksteady are actually saying, "We get to tie up April. We get to tie up April." And I'm like, wow, they've really gotten used to this. So, is that a form of sexual abuse in a cartoon?
Well, what's the further context? What's the motivation? Are they tying up April to keep her from getting away, to use her as bait, or are they tying her up to pull some BDSM stuff?
Yes.
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 Why did that hit you so hard, Gold?
I knew where this was going. And the fact that Silver Quill answers with yes is just the cherry on top.
50 Shades of Grey Rhinoceros.
Will Eisen says the best joke about the damsel in distress is the Dover boys, and that's a really good point.
Oh God!
Because that chick beats the frick out of
over here.
Yeah, that chick beats the frick out of Dan Backslide and then runs off with discount Popeye the Sailor.
Oh God!
It's true. That was, but then there's always the counterpoint of Droopy Dog and Red. Gosh, there was a Western episode where Red gets kidnapped by both the villain and the hero, just because they got the hots for her.
Yeah.
So I'm taking us into very dangerous territory. I apologize.
No, there is no dangerous territory or censorship here. Take us there, Silver.
But it's great because Silver, you're illustrating the point by trying to find examples of kid. Well, this is a terrible sentence, of kid-friendly depictions of sexual abuse. Wow, somebody clip that. Oh my God. I can't believe that sentence was just said out loud. But like it illustrates the point that the presentation matters, because if we go to back to gun violence, is gun violence safe for kids? G.I. Joe, yes. The first 5 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, no. The way you present something, 1,000% matters, because you say something like sexual abuse and you go, oh my God, keep the children away. But if you're like, well, yeah, Snidely is going to tie her to the railroad tracks.
Thaddeus R. brings up a good point real quick here. What about when Big Mac tried to kiss Sugar Belle while she was sleeping?
Well, the audience knows this is a bad idea going in, I'm pretty sure. And the fact she screams, that's good. If she had been like, oh, I'm into that, it's like, nope, abort, run away.
Yep. So, Cordero, to finish your point, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, the presentation matters, because like if we're saying, oh well, tying a damsel to the railroad tracks is a form of sexual assault, well there you go. It depends on how you present it. Like almost any, and I say almost any dark theme can be presented to younger audience if you present it in a way that's digestible to them. And that's part of the art of making cartoons, is like, oh, how do we have our characters deal with suffering and loss so that we can tell good stories? Well, if we're going to have death and dismemberment or whatever, we have to find a way to present it in a way that it won't get censored, and B, if even if it doesn't get censors, that there won't be a public outcry, or the kids won't want to stop watching it.
Which
And that's presentation. Presentation is everything.
Which kind of reminds me of Batman the Animated Series, where the WB censors went up to the producers and writers and said, you can't show any deaths on screen. So what they said then, okay, so what's worse than death without dying? And proceeded to make some pretty horrific scenarios that the villains would go through. Like, for example, one of them got turned into an immortal. Got turned immortal like Dr. Freeze and encased in ice and dropped to the bottom of the ocean. Or the Joker
screaming at a fish.
Yeah, the Joker's laughing gas. The list goes on.
Yeah.
So
Joker's electrocution.
Exactly. So
We have everything with the Animaniacs.
Does anybody want to add to that before we move on? Okay, I think we're good. Commodore Steele says, Brony, no one insults American Dragon Jake Long and gets away with it. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? That's my question there. What are we going to do about it? Would you like to sit down and try to watch an episode of American Dragon with me, Commodore? Because I promise I will ruin that show for you. Fetch 26291 says, my favorite early 2000s cartoons was Totally Spies, and Fetch, you are objectively wrong. Because Fetch also mentioned a couple of minutes ago when we were talking about sexual assault that in Totally Spies someone gets put into some bondage looking situation at least once an episode, and yes, that's what happens when the creator was literally trying to make softcore hentai. This is why we don't let French people make cartoons.
Wow.
Yes, to say.
Or Netflix specials.
Yeah, that as well.
Cuties was French.
Not.
Oh God.
Yeah, this is what
Documentaries. Nothing is safe from the French.
Oh man, I almost made a really bad joke, but I'm gonna wait until we're off air. So it's so bad that even me that I normally don't care, and I'm like, I'm gonna save this one. Audience, you can
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, audience, you can just sit there and wonder what it is. Live with that suspense. Anyway, Cosma Inspira says, are there any upcoming animated movies or shows that we're looking forward to?
Into the Spider-Verse 2.
Same. There's plenty out there. Like, I can't name them at the top of my head. Lightyear.
He has a new one coming up.
I didn't know Into the Spider-Verse was getting a sequel.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah, Across the Spider-Verse.
So I guess
part 1.
I guess I can say that I'm looking forward to that now, but otherwise I can't really say anything. I don't really keep my finger on the pulse of these things. They just sort of drop into my lap.
Fair.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm waiting on the rest of the Owl House.
That show's no good.
Having just finished Arcane Season 1, I'm eagerly awaiting Season 2. And...
Arcane is so good.
Yeah, so, Silver, be sure to let Cordero know when you start actually playing League of Legends. He can hook you up with a good guild.
Don't play. Don't play. Don't do it.
Don't do it? What?
The community is that bad. As somebody who's addicted to League of Legends, it is an addiction. It's worse than oxycodone, and it's worse than the opium prices. Do not start League of Legends. It's cancer. It'll ruin your life. But watch Arcane. Arcane's great.
Yeah, I love Arcane. I think it's fantastic.
It is.
I'm also looking forward to the new seasons of South Park and Archer.
I'm surprised Archer is still going.
As am I. I'm not sure how they're going to handle the shift in the dynamic. I guess that's why I'm eager to watch.
Interesting. I stopped with at Archer with season 3. And just
the first seasons were probably the most iconic in humor.
Phrasing.
But iconic in humor?
No, he's just quoting the catchphrase.
Okay. Now,
how did you miss that one?
I just wanted to say something from Archer.
God,
Shut up.
Was that DJ? Or was that Gold Bug?
That wasn't mine this time.
Yeah, that was Silver
know.
hitting himself.
That's right. Oh, also, Al Max in the chat saying, someone take away Silver soundboard. Never!
Can't have mine either.
Come fight me, brah.
Magical Dude wants to know my opinion on anime since it's also animation. I can't really divide anime into eras like I can with cartoons because there's just so much of it and it all looks the same. And a good 99%, like most. So I'll say that 90% of shows in the last 40 years have been trash. I'd say 99% of all anime altogether is trash.
Rolls eyes. Do we have to have an anime debate?
We've already had a few of those.
Let's have another.
All right, sure. I guess it.
Have we had a how bad is anime? Because it sounds like that's what you want.
I don't want that because I'm right. Anime is really bad. Okay. Well, if we're gonna do that, why don't we just lump how bad is rap music in with it? Rap music's pretty freaking bad too. That rap music's also got a 99 percentile. Fight me.
Challenge accepted. I'll fight you on that one too.
All right. What were you saying, DJ?
I was trying to look up the new show by Genndy Tartakovsky. It's Unicorn Warriors Eternal. That's the one I'm looking forward to. The maker of Samurai Jack. He's doing a super.
Tartakovsky very rarely misses. He's pretty good.
Well, don't put anyone on too high a pedestal. You get Shyamalan otherwise.
No, well, you see, Shyamalan was never good, but now we're talking about
Shyamalan
yeah, exactly. So, did anybody else see any comments or questions in the chat throughout the stream that they wanted to?
I had one. This was from Paladin asking, how many cartoons that were based on video games have you watched? That's that I don't have an exact number.
The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, and I think
Are
that's
you hooked on the brothers?
I like Sad AM.
I like Sonic Underground.
Me too, a little.
Never got to see that. Okay, here we go.
Super Mario Brothers Super Show, anyone?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I remember that.
Pokemon.
All right, let's see here. I've gone through Super Mario Brothers Super Show, Legend of Zelda, Captain N, which was truly the bottom of the barrel, I think. Mortal Kombat, Defenders of the Realm. Let's see, what other video games? Sonic and Sonic Sad AM. Earthworm Jim.
Yes.
I always forget that was an actual cartoon.
It
Yeah,
was
that
a really
was a
good
good
cartoon,
one.
too.
Earthworm Jim.
Let's see. I feel like there's another video game that Mega Man. Yes. Super Fighting Robot.
That song will never leave your. It will never leave your skull.
Yeah.
Mega Man.
Personally, I prefer NT Warrior.
Oh, yep, that's true. I also saw Anti-Warrior, but that's anime, and I feel like anime is like off the road. But nothing was quite as low as Captain N, and yet I was enchanted.
That's the one where they were all weird looking, right?
Oh my god, you know what? Captain N is like the first isekai.
Isekai?
I thought that was Dot Hack Sign, actually.
This came out years before Dot Hack.
Oh, really?
Oh, the plot is a young man, a teenager, gets sucked into a video game world where all the Nintendo intellectual property are together, but they look nothing like their in-game counterparts. And he goes on all these adventures.
That's the one with Mega Midget.
Mega Midget, Kid Icarus, who's going through puberty for 20 years. Simon Belmont. Oh my God, what did they do to Simon?
Like Ash Ketchum. Got that Ash Ketchum puberty period.
Oh, you said Simon Belmont, and so yeah, the Castlevania show was really good.
Yes, that
Oh,
was
the Castle-
absolutely amazing.
Although, does that count as anime?
No, it's made in the States.
No.
Okay, then.
It was made, yeah.
But yeah, now that I think about it, Captain N was the first isekai that I know of, and that's why I don't like the genre at all.
The one poison.
Malik Muhammad says, give Sonic Boom a watch from 2017 and very witty.
I've heard that that's one of those shows that is so bad it's good, and it embraces it by just its goofy nature and its fourth wall jokes.
I would have shortened that, Golden, into what I call the Office problem, where it's not a good show, but it's got a lot of clips. It's a meme farm, and then
stories.
it's a meme farm, and like it's like you sit down, you watch an episode, and it might get like one or two chuckles out of you for the line, but for the most part, you're just like, why am I watching this? That's The Office. That's SpongeBob. That's Sonic Boom.
When we say game based, are we including tabletop gaming?
I mean, we could.
Because Dungeons and Dragons had a show, didn't it?
It did, and in fact, one of the characters on there, Brony, fits your criteria of rooting for the coward. There was a young man who consistently wanted to avoid danger, but when his friends were in trouble, he would rise to the occasion. He was probably the standout character, if only for his perpetual complaining. But then I saw someone mention Mech Warrior in the chat. Yes, Derek 2011 Brony mentioned Mech Warrior. There was a BattleTech cartoon, which was one of the first cartoons to try and integrate computer graphics with limited success.
Okay. Speaking of...
Yeah, what's up, Golden?
Yeah, okay, so speaking of, and this is kind of backtracking to that question, regarding game adaptations. Silver, okay, I'm not going to fault you for hating Captain N and how garbage it is, but what do you think is worse, that or the CGI Donkey Kong Country series?
Oh, that whole Banana Slammer thing. You know, I'm going to go with Captain N still. And Golden, please understand, I loved Captain N growing up. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Looking back on it, every critique I see of the series is legitimate, but even then, even acknowledging the critiques, I still liked it.
Absolutely.
Mother Brain in particular was quite fascinating.
Oh, yeah, no. We all have our guilty pleasures.
But Donkey Kong, the CG, it said it was Donkey Kong, it looked like Donkey Kong. The whole Banana Slammer thing can be left to the ashes of time. Captain N didn't look like the cartoons it based on. And to show you what a huge nerd I am, there was an episode of Captain N where they had to go through Mega Man's first game. And they're like, oh, Captain N says, I went through this level 50 times before I got to Cutsman. And I'm on the screen going, that's because you're not supposed to start with Cutsman. You're the game master. You're an idiot. Yes, that is how big a nerd I was with video games back in the day. Captain Ed, you don't start with Cutman. Stay in your lane.
I've never played a Mega Man game, so I have no idea what you're talking about.
Think of it as a rock, paper, scissors event. Each boss is weak to a certain element. So if you discern the chain of weaknesses, you can go through the levels with greater ease.
All right.
But don't start with Cutman!
Did anybody else have anything from chat they wanted to tackle?
Oh, I have one. If you want more Hanna-Barbera information, tell Golden to get Keyframe. Apparently she's a Hanna-Barbera expert.
Ah.
She's a giant Scooby-Doo fan along with Ghostbusters.
Yes. Scooby-Dooby-Doo.
Oh, there's another song that'll never leave your head.
Yeah.
But everyone knows it's never going to be as bad as having DuckTales stuck in your head.
DuckTales, woohoo!
Am I the only one that's never had that problem?
Yeah,
you know what problem I've had is getting the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air stuck in my head. Would you believe I was working at a nightclub in 2014? I was working at a nightclub and they unironically put the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air song up. And
I didn't know nightclubs had a kiddie section.
And people were rocking out to it. People were waving their guns around dancing to this song, like just totally into it.
Different times.
Yeah, different times 7 years ago.
I mean,
they were chilling out acting like some cool, shooting some b-ball outside the school, all up in the club.
Oh, geez, I parodied that one in the last A Buck to the Face I did.
That was great.
It wasn't great. I thought it came out horribly. Will Eisen was in the chat there. He fixed it for me because what I did was just did not come out right. Apparently, I used a bad version of the instrumental, and that's why anyway, it could have been way worse, is what I'm saying. All right, shall we wrap it up, or is there anything else?
One final question from the chat.
Yes.
Easy mode gamer, asking Disney, Fox, Nickelodeon, or Cartoon Network.
Half of those are the same thing these days.
Yes.
No, but back in the day, Fox Saturday mornings. Huh.
Cartoon Network for me.
I can't say if I lined them all up and listed everything good about them, they'd all have the same amount of good points to them, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, my gut leans Cartoon Network as well.
Magical Dude says if we could go into any cartoon of our choice, which would it be and why? So this will be a good one to end on. Angel, what do you think? You get to isekai yourself into any cartoon of your choice. What is it and why?
Oh, there are so many choices. How could I just pick one? I don't know.
All right. Golden, what do you think?
I honestly don't have a choice to pick because each one has something that is based on like a personal preference and such. Because with whichever ones I grew up with, it was all dependent on what I was in the mood for. I guess Nickelodeon, because I remember most of which watching, like, this is kind of in the same vein with what Silver Quill had with Captain N, is with me watching and growing up with Rugrats, which, yeah, Rugrats has shown a lot of its age for the past several decades.
Silver, what do you think?
Am I allowed to bring weapons or other hostile elements?
No, it's just you.
Double dang.
It's just
We're
you.
throwing
You
Silver
are
in.
your own hostile element.
It's true. Well then, I will forgo the obvious MLP and say I would go into Dungeons and Dragons and get a conclusion.
Okay. You're going to have like a stack of character sheets.
Look, I'll go as a bard and I'll have like 20 books of backup characters. You can use the corpse pile as a shield.
I remember that scene. Cordero.
Well, if you do choose MLP, make sure you don't go in as your Alicorn OCs because imitating royalty is a capital offense. But yeah, MLP does seem like an obvious one. But if I were to pick something, what would be more fun, challenging? I don't know. Oh gosh, you caught me. I'm trying to think on the spot, and I don't want to just fall back on MLP. You know what? I'll jump into the Rugrats universe.
All right, so we got two people going into
That'd be-
Rugrats. Now, are you going?
I thought you were arguing that the Rugrats one was showing it.
No. We're talking about what show we would isekai ourselves into if we could.
Yeah. I isekai myself into Rugrats as a parent of a 2-year-old.
Alrighty then.
Although now that I think about it, maybe I should go to Simpsons and attain immortality, because it will never end.
Yeah.
Never ever.
DJ, what do you think?
Considering anime is probably off the table here.
It's not. I wouldn't say it is.
Oh, then Pokemon. Duh.
So you want to be a naive child forever?
I mean, I
Sounds
don't
great.
have to, but
Oh yeah, immortality.
yeah, you got
Oh, yeah.
immortality and you got kaiju fights.
I wouldn't.
that are intense.
I'm not gonna shy away from it like a few of the other guys in here did. I'm just gonna say I would go into Friendship is Magic, completely unironically, hard stop. It out of everything that we talked about tonight, and out of everything that I've seen, yes, it's not without danger, and that always drove me nuts in fan fiction when it was depicted as some type of heaven. But out of everything I've seen, it is definitely the most egalitarian, and it is definitely the most peaceful. And I feel like I wouldn't die instantly if I was there.
Would you do well in an agrarian society? Do you think you could find a trade or work on a farm like Applejack? Or
I could certainly try, and I
Can end up just like his character in the show.
Or he could buck the trend.
yeah, just well that even in a buck to the face, which is basically just pretty much literally me. Yeah, I mean, still made the wrong decision, still just traveling all the time, broke as heck, trying to figure out what to do next. But I don't think.
Words of homo.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer the term vagabond. Thank you.
Just because you're cultured doesn't mean you can use fancy words.
Hark, a vagrant.
Although, if anyone does go into the Pokemon universe, you have to promise me you'll kill a Mantine in my name.
A Mantine, not the tyke?
Mantine.
Okay, but I can keep the tyke.
Yes, keep the tyke.
Well,
The tyke is
just out of
innocent.
curiosity, Silver, what's your beef with that particular Pokemon?
Those horrible, unblinking eyes as they stare into you, as you drown beneath the waves, and it just stares.
Okay, so
smiling. Smiling.
Mantine is off the table, but Ditto is good. Togepi.
Don't you be messing with Togepi. What you?
Yeah, like
What the hell, man?
What's the issue? What's your issue with Togepi?
He's
What did
mentioned.
Togepi do to you?
How about Clefairy? He's just talking about the unblinking eyes, and I'm thinking of as many Pokemon as I can that have the same face.
Togepi can blink.
Yeah, Clefairies can blink, but you can fire them back into space. I won't fault you.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't like Clefairies.
All
They're
right.
overpowered.
just for you, Silver, we'll roast a Mantine with a Blaziken and then sacrifice the remains to Ho-Oh.
Oh, you are my moodkin.
Okay, so I think that's a good spot to call it there. Let's go down the line here and give some closing thoughts and one thing we learned. Golden, closing thoughts, one thing we learned.
We've learned a few dark things about companies. Well, I at least did. I've learned that there's different viewpoints that are much more to think about and not just rely on your own nostalgia. And take everything what some people say with a pinch of salt. So that's where I end my part.
All right. Angel, one thing you learned and some closing thoughts.
I learned that Disney killed Fleischer according to Cordero. And no closing thoughts.
Okay. Silver, one thing you learned and some closing thoughts.
Well, I did learn of the history of Fleischer animation and Disney's impact on, well, not just shaping opinions, but also closing off avenues of history. I think that's a way to phrase it. And closing thoughts. Well, one, someone in the chat was asking, yes, I do fondly remember Pirates of Dark Water. And that's the thing. Entertainment really is a subjective experience. And sometimes we romanticize what came before. Sometimes we romanticize what was part of our childhood. Or we might be entranced by something new. It all comes down to personal experience. And so don't knock until you try it. But also, it's okay to agree and still on the criticisms and still like something.
All right. Cordero, closing thoughts and one thing you learned.
I learned that if you're going to be part of a burgeoning new media experience and be part of creating something from scratch, make sure that you Max Fleischer the competition before they Disney you.
Alrighty then. I'm not 100% sure what that means, but I'm sure it's very wise. DJ, what do you think?
It's not.
I've definitely learned maybe not learn, but definitely solidify that animation has quite a rich history, and it means something different to everyone, no matter what the era, or even if you even consider there are eras. And I think as we go into the future, there's going to be even more. And what I can just hope for is that as much as we enjoy the new, we'll also remember what came before and built them. So always
Alright.
remember your history so you're not doomed to repeat it.
Yep, the Crystal Ponies need our help. We can save them with their history. Alrighty then.
We can't save them from obscurity, however.
Mm-hmm.
That's shining beef.
I still think that Looney Tunes can't be beat in terms of quality and what it's accomplished and for how long it accomplished. But I learned that there's a lot more that goes into making other shows that I've criticized than just the corporate backing that went into funding the shows. So I'll end with that tonight. And that being said, I hope you all had fun tonight. Did you all have fun on the show tonight?
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
good. And thank you all for tuning in to watch. I hope you enjoyed yourself. If you want to hang out with me some more, tomorrow night I'll be on Princess Heather Blossom's channel at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to hang out and read the chat while she does some crocheting. That show is called Chaos and Crocheting. Next Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'm going to be on playing a video game chosen by whoever of my patrons gets the lucky draw. If you would like to be on the show, I'd love to have you. You can get on the show for just $1 a month. Gets you on the Patreon Discord server where we hang out, and your suggestions for Brony Debates topics become priority, and you can pick the game for Friday Night Fights. Very grateful to all of my generous supporters on Patreon, especially those on the $10 and up tier. These are Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministries, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Sodden, Girder, Senko, Kyle Christensen, DJ Skywalker, who joined us tonight, Rein-Kun, Morningstar, Pony Cordero, who's with us tonight, QFlash, Billy Henline, Alden MacManx, Easy Mo Gamer, Sophia, Bootleg Bard, who suggested tonight's topic, and Dark Malcontent, author of the Metaverse series. Please check out all their links in the description, as they make some pretty good content too that I would highly recommend. And with that being said, have a wonderful weekend. God bless, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Say goodnight, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Soundboard.